One of the things I do is I keep a list of just ideas that come to me for potential videos. And they could be random things, often they might be around how we think, obviously, but politics or coronavirus or race relations or sports. I've done all different topics. And one of the ones I've had on the list for a while was meant to be kind of a fun one, was a Facebook post that I see people make a lot. Typically older people, not to generalize or stereotype or anything like that, but it's just factual. Typically when I see it, it's, people around my mom's age or demographic and people like that. And they'll make this post and it's a copy and paste, right? You've probably seen these on Facebook before. They literally just copy the post that somebody else made and you post it on your own. But it reads something like, I've been having problems with it usually starts with "it really works!" exclamation point, exclamation point. I've been having problems with my Facebook feed. I feel like I'm not seeing, any posts, but trust me, this works. If you copy and paste this text, it'll override the system and it'll fix your feed. I can't believe it. It's so great. I'm seeing so many posts now. Copy and paste this into your status and you'll get the same benefit. And, you step back and you think about that and you laugh a little bit and you say, that's so silly. Like, that's so absurd. And I always laugh when I read it because I think, why would you think that would work? Like, first of all, what system is being overridden? And what makes you think the system was set up in such a way to be overridden by this random, weird message that you're copy and pasting, that actually part of the message is copy and paste, and oh my God, it works, right? They set up the system that way so that exact piece, it just doesn't make sense. What exactly is the issue that your feed has that you're fixing? There's so many reasons you look at it and you say, well, that's absurd. So I had it on my mind, as I said, it's kind of just a funny topic to explore a little bit and how people think and how do they get convinced of something like that. It's not a huge action that they took, but people will post this and they'll take this action. So I had that on my mind and I was going to do that post and have kind of some fun with it. And then the other day I was having dinner with my family and we were talking about, I believe it was coronavirus and just kind of everything that's going on. And in the flow of the conversation, at some point I said something along the lines of if I were to get it, God forbid, and I knocked on wood. And as soon as I did that, I guess because this other topic had been in my mind, it kind of clicked for me. And I realized that I'm knocking on wood. I'm in effect doing the same thing that these people are doing on Facebook. There's some ridiculous random action that somehow I've been convinced is going to result in some big benefit for me based on no logic, no data, no science, no evidence, just this ridiculous concept, right? The idea being, obviously, if I say I'm going to get coronavirus, I have to knock on wood and magically, mystically, somehow, I won't get it anymore. And if I had not knocked on wood, then I would have gotten it. And I've done that for years. I've done that my whole life and never really thought much about it. And you could say, well, what's the big deal? It's just kind of a tradition, old wives' tale type, whatever you want to call it, superstition. But it made me think, obviously, instantly, first thing, wow, this is just another reason why, it's so easy to look outward and judge people and throw stones and criticize what they do and criticize how people think. And when you have a perspective where you've learned so much about how the mind works, almost laughingly identify when other people are playing into the flaws of their mind. It's so easy to do that outwardly, but it's so hard to see it sometimes for yourself, right? The importance of always challenging and checking yourself. And in this case, I was, almost mocking these people, and I'm doing something maybe even more absurd, right? Arguably, even less likely to work. So good reminder in that, and kind of just the consistency and the self-awareness. And when you have the inclination or the urge, when you see somebody do something seemingly absurd or illogical, stop and think a little bit more first. So that was the first thought. The second thought was, hey, as I always try and do, this is an opportunity, because I was going to make a video trying to understand how these people think, right? Why they're making this post. How could they possibly imagine that it's going to work? But I could probably figure that out now somewhat myself. I could start scanning myself and asking myself some questions since I'm doing something similar. And as I mentioned, I think an initial thought is hey, why this one's not worth it? Knocking on wood, it's a superstition. It's not worth it. It's just something silly you do. If you think of it in terms of a cost-benefit analysis, as I often do, the cost is so low to just knock on wood. Why is it even worth analyzing? And that's arguably true. And if you wanted to get really kind of deeper or into it, you could say, well, maybe it does do something too. How do we know for sure? There's not some mystical being or spiritual God, what have you, that sits and set up some rule where if you knock on wood, it's a good thing. I mean, maybe, right? Unlikely, but maybe. But let's assume it doesn't work. Well, the math should still check out then, right? If it's that illogical, if it's that unscientific, the math should still check out that you shouldn't do it. There's no reason to keep knocking on wood, yet I keep doing it, even as I say it right now. I could logically understand I should stop doing it, but it would be a hard thing for me to stop doing. It's become embedded into my brain that like, yeesh, that's risky. Like if I don't knock on wood, I don't know, man, like this may actually happen to me. So that's fascinating if you really think about it, right? Like how has it gotten to a point where my mind is defending that and believing that so deeply that even as I say it right now, I can feel the uncomfortableness in me of the idea of not doing it. And again, obviously parallels back to the Facebook post because, you know, you could imagine somebody thinking that same way, like, I don't know, this probably doesn't work, but maybe like, you know, it's what's the harm? And it would be great to fix my feed or whatever it is. So, you know, the reason why it matters is one, to me, it's just interesting. So anytime something's interesting or inconsistent, or there appears to be some illogical nature to it, I want to dig in and understand it. But it's also important, I think, because for anybody, you know, in this case, it's a small action. It's pasting something on Facebook. It's knocking on wood. But if your brain is willing to push you and convince you to do something that you know almost with certainty, as close as we can get to it, that it is not worth it, right? It does not work. It won't achieve whatever you think it's going to achieve. If your mind can still convince you to do that regularly, what else might it convince you to do? What are the other things that maybe are more important that you're already doing or might come up that you would go along with? So to me, you kind of think of it in the terms of the slippery slope concept. If you allow some of this stuff and don't question it, how do you know? How can you be sure that there's not other ridiculous things that have much deeper, more meaningful, more impactful implications where you allow this to happen? So, you know, back to that, I think that mindset, that understanding of why it's being protected. And I think as it often does, it comes down to some form of fear, right? The idea of, well, just in case, right? Just to be safe, I better do it. In both those cases, the post and the knocking on wood. And it's another instance where kind of fear rears its ugly head. And fear, as we've talked about before, fear overrides all the math. It overrides everything, changes the equation, and it leads you to an answer almost indefinitely or definitely not based on logic, because fear kicks in and that overrides all of that. And that's all you need to justify is fear. So in this case, for me, I don't want to get the coronavirus. So as absurd as it might be, I knock on wood. So maybe you keep knocking on wood. Maybe that's not a huge deal. Maybe you don't, right? Something to think about and explore. But I think if nothing else, it becomes an instrument where as long as you can be aware of something like that, when you are knocking on wood and that it's not really logical, you can start to unpack and say, well, what's the fear underlying that, right? Let me understand at least what's driving me to do that action and why, and try and understand it better. Because again, the knocking on wood, not that important, but maybe there's some other aspect of it. In this case, we're talking about coronavirus. You know, maybe I have a deep-rooted fear that I'm going to get it or my family's going to get it. And in that case, I feel very compelled to knock on wood. Because if I said, you know, hey, I'm gonna be late going to a meeting or a class or something like that, odds are I'm not knocking on wood because it's not that scary to me. But when it comes to getting coronavirus or something more serious, then God forbid, right, you knock on wood. So it's probably a good sign or a check to say, hey, explore that a little bit. You have some fear going on here or something, usually fear. It's leading you in some simple, small, somewhat meaningless way to do something irrational. You might want to check it out to make sure it doesn't have you doing anything else or that it doesn't in the future, and better understand that fear and understand what's driving my fear of coronavirus. Why do I think it's so dangerous? Why do I think it's something that I'm at risk? You know, whatever it is, and delve into that more. So again, started as kind of a silly topic, but as most of these things do, gave me some good lessons about reminding myself to be self-aware, not take the easy bait of judging others so quickly because, you know, make sure your closet's clean first. And then as always, you know, trying to identify instruments, something that helps us identify when we might not be thinking logically. And this may be another tool for that.